but sorry it's a little later than I usually do, as I generally do it about 4ish. So yeah, but sorry it's a little late, as at that time I was in an exam. So yeah, and then trying to get some results. So yeah, so here is today's ology, which is psychopathology. Now, and this is the scientific study of mental disorders. It also features of mental people's mental health considered collectively, and found up with mental behavioural disorder. Now it's also called abnormal psychology. Now the study of mental disorders and unusual or maladaptive behaviours. The understanding of a journey. Sorry, just talking about the exam. Now, this is an understanding of the genesis of mental disorders is critical to mental health professionals like psychiatry, psychology and social work. And a controversial issue is in psychopathology is a distinction between dysfunctional or aberrant and more idiosyncratic behaviours. Now, psychopathology is a term which refers to either study of mental health, mental illness or mental distress, or the manifestation of behaviours and experiences which may be indicative of mental illness or psychological impairment. And there are many different professions which may be involved in studying mental illness or distress. Most notably, psychiatrists and clinical psychologists are particularly interested in this area and may either be involved in the clinical treatment of mental illness or research into the origins of, development of, and manifestations of such states, sometimes both, which can be a common occurrence. So more widely, there are many different specialities that may be involved in the study of psychopathology. Neuroscientologists may focus on brain changes related to mental illness, and therefore someone who is referred to as psychopathologist may be one of a number of professions who have specialised in this area of study. Psychiatrists are particularly interested in the descriptive psychopathology, which has the aim of describing symptoms as syndromes of the mental illness. It is about the diagnosis of the individual patients, see whether the patient experience fits any pre-existing classification, for the creation of a diagnostic system, such as the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual of Mental Disorders, which define exactly which signs and symptoms should make up a diagnosis, and how experiences and behaviours should be grouped in particular diagnoses, like clinical depression and schizophrenia. Psychopathology is not the same as psychopathy, which has to do with antisocial disorders and antisocial personality disorders and criminality. That's right, the term psychopathology simply refers to the refers to like a scientific study of mental illnesses, along with factors which may contribute or be relevant to such disorders. And causes of mental disorders may fall under various categories such as psychological, social, or genetic. And this field also examines mental conditions across the lifespan, development stages, or manifestations, examining the treatments that are effective in treating various manifestations. The determination of mental health conditions is guided by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders (DSM), which identifies the criteria that must be present in order for mental health practitioners to come to a specific diagnosis. Carl Jaspers is credited with founding the area of the field of discipline in 1913, and professionals who have studied the concepts involved in the discipline today are primarily clinical psychologists and psychiatrists. These mental health practitioners work in various ways. I've got a notification from Pinterest coming up on my screen. These mental health practitioners may approach their work in various ways, and they may focus on the treatment of patients who are dealing with forms of mental illness. Other way may take a research approach in order to really dissect the causes, like development and manner in such conditions can manifest themselves and live in the lives of the individuals who have them. Some may practice both treatment and the research. And it's like when it comes to making like a diagnosis, there's like 4 themes or abnormalities that are considered. Now they've come to known as the 4Ds. They are deviance, distress, dysfunction, and anger, although the last one is nothing to do with D. These 4 criteria define the concept of abnormality. And deviance just saying this refers to behaviours, thoughts and emotions that are unacceptable in a society or group. Now, distress is a negative feeling that one has in response to their own disorder. Dysfunction is anything that causes a behaviour that causes an individual to be unable to perform daily functions needed to live a productive lifestyle. Danger refers to like the kind of behaviour exhibited that indicated the presence of mental illnesses. There's like many types of disorders as well. The DSM that manual mentioned, guides practitioners in the identification of treatment and psychological disorders. In order for it to be considered a disorder, a problem must occur within an individual and something the individual cannot control. There are numerous disorders listed within the guide. Some are more common can include bipolar disorders, which are mood disorders involving both manic and depressive episodes. There's major depressive disorder, which is a mood disorder characterized by the lack of energy, decreased mood, loss of motivation, and thoughts of suicide. There's borderline personality disorder, and patterns of unstable, which is kind of defined as patterns of unstable relationships, paranoid thoughts, emotional instability, and intense outbursts of anger. There's also schizophrenia, which is altered perception of reality, hallucinations, and delusional thoughts can be observed in schizophrenia. Then there's also phobias, which is the excessive reaction of perception of danger. The listed, now that's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg of disorders, and like their conditions and symptoms that can be found in the DSM. Psychopathology is a broad encompassing study of how mental disorders are identified by professionals and manifested within the individual. So yeah, and one more thing, like, now if Anakin Skywalker was real, even though he was a fictional character, now probably would have been likely to have been diagnosed as to have had borderline personality disorder. So yeah, just one more fun fact in there for you. I'll see you very soon for the news and all, so au revoir.